Okay, today's lesson is how to texturize lettering so that you can express interest in what you're trying to say. What I mean by that is the texture that you're using in the words helps communicate the meaning of the words. But in the creative way, what the texture is and what the words are not exactly the same. You're looking at an example that I'm going to demonstrate where I shot a bunch of elbow pasta and processed it a bit in Photoshop, and what I did was I came up with an expression, and my expression is getting hungry. Notice I didn't use the word pasta in shooting pasta. So that's the trick. That's almost half the level of difficulty in this project, is coming up with an expression to use. Other things I want to highlight in this project are using a fairly thick font so that it picks up the texture, using soft shadow, as well as using stroke. And stroke is the black outline that you're seeing around the letters. That's not necessarily the order that we're going to do things, but this is the end result. So let's get started. I'm going to minimize this. This is our photograph of pasta, and this may not have been the initial picture. I would suggest once you bring a picture in that you use levels to help pump up, saturate, otherwise, try to intensify the quality of the texture you're using, because more saturation, more contrast, more oomph in the picture really helps create a stronger suggestion of what that texture is implying. So once you've done levels, and you can use anything else that you want to use to process the picture. So that's levels, that's contrast, saturation, color adjust, anything in your quiver of tools, so to speak, that you can use. So let's get started. Once you come up with your phrase, you need to use a special tool in your text menu on the toolbar on the side to create what's called a text mask. On the toolbar you have your regular T or text tool. If you notice a little triangle in the bottom corner, it means you can hold the tool down to get more tools, kind of like fleshing it out. So besides your normal text tool, there's a dotted T. There's two of them actually. There's one there, then there's down text, and a down text for a text mask. We just want the dotted text, which is the second tool in. In doing that, you have an I-beam. In my case, I'm going to click right in the middle of my texture, and I'm going to type my phrase. My phrase is getting hungry. So capital G, E-T-T-I-N-G, hungry, question mark. If you make this two lines big, it will appear bigger on the screen. Pay attention to the formatting. I want mine centered. And also pay attention to your text size. You'll have to experiment with this. So because you're experimenting, who likes to have to type things over and over again? So highlight the word, copy it, and I don't know, let's start with 400 points, text size. So when I hit OK, well, I don't know if you can tell, but 400 points goes from here to here, not very wide. So that's not wide enough. The bigger the text occupies the texture, the more the texture you're going to see in the text. So we're going to go with that tool again. Just click anywhere in the middle. I'm going to go Control V for paste, and instead of the 600, I'm going to go 850 and hit OK. In doing so, now I have a texture, or I have words just in a dotted line marquee that occupy pretty much the whole width without anything getting cut off. Notice that while I'm on that text mask tool, I can go in the middle of my text and I can move that mask around. I can also use my cursor keys to micro adjust it. Just a second. So, had to let the dog in. So now that I have it, I can move it around just to make sure none of my mask is being cut off, and that looks pretty good. At this point, you want to double check that your mask is taking advantage of all the good parts of the texture. So really critical parts that help identify what the texture is. You know, in this case, elbow pasta. Make sure that that is in there. Now you're going to copy. So Control C. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make a new file. And this file will be exactly the size of the mask. So I'm just going to go File, New. And don't worry about the pixel count. I know it's exactly the size of the mask. And because I had white in the background, it'll be a white background, new file. But the problem is, because I want soft shadow going on, this canvas, so to speak, is not big enough. So I need to increase the canvas size. And that is done through Image, Canvas Size, and I like to go percentage. So I go 120%, Tab, 120, and I hit OK. The canvas gets larger. Now I can paste, Control V, I can paste my texture in. And I'm looking at this and I can see that I can see the details of the noodles, or the pasta rather, the elbow pasta, and it looks really good. So I'm happy with that. Otherwise, you're going to have to go back to the original and try a different position, try a different font if the font isn't fat enough. Okay, so now that this is done, let's do the next step, which is adding stroke. Stroke is a way to increase the crispness or the punch of the text. So especially if you have any white in your texture, this will help separate the texture from anything else. Okay, so the way we do this is in the Edit pull-down menu. So we're going to go Edit and undo paste. We don't want to do that, but we want not fill, but stroke. So stroke. Now it comes up with a window, and so my default width is 10. Some of you it might be 3 or 4. So you're going to experiment, but I'm going to go with 12, and I'm going to hit OK. The other thing is, you notice it says location, inside, center, outside. I'm going to go outside, and I'm going to hit OK. And right away, you see the punch, how that really crisps up. It's up to you whether you like whether the strokes touch each other in terms of the words, the lettering, and whatnot. I like the look of that, so I'm going to continue from there. The last stage of this is to add soft shadow, and there's 2 different ways to do this. Depending on your resolution, the coolest way is to use your layers. So if I go into I'm just going to move my layers window. You notice I have a background layer, which is that white, and I have the layer that has the words in it. If I right click on the layer with the words, I have this option called Effects. And the default one that comes up for me is the top one. It's Drop Shadow. So I'll move this out of the way a bit so you can see the words and you can see your parameters. We're going to start playing around. The first thing I'm going to play around with is distance. Because I'm dealing with a fairly high-res picture, I'm boosting my distance up to around 46 or so. So opacity is how solid it is. So we're throwing this over top of another texture. You want it because naturally shadows are somewhat see-through or semi-opaque. So you can control that nature through the opacity slider. 120 degrees for an angle isn't bad. Like 120, that general direction, or 45. Either of those 2 directions. Don't cast shadows upward, that's just weird. And we don't like seeing shadows directly up, or sorry, directly down, because you're missing the opportunity of showing 2 sides of an object. So I'm going to stick with around 120, 124. That looks good. And what I really like to play around with is blur. So increase the blur, I start to see the fuzziness going on. I like that. And if I make that more opaque, then I'm going to see it more apparently. And intensity, if you go too much with the intensity, it just starts to harshen or harden up the shadow, and that's not really the point we're after. So I'm keeping my intensity fairly low, so I have a nice fuzzy edge. Okay, I hit OK with that, and now I have, and if I move my words along, obviously the texture is going with it. That looks really good. The other way of doing shadows is to duplicate the words letter for letter, exactly the same size, and sometimes it's hard to do because you don't remember what you did last time. So I'll just show you an example. I go to a solid text tool, I click in the middle. I can't really paste my words back because I've done some copying and pasting since then. So getting hungry, question mark. This 850 should be exactly the same size as the last one I did. So this time it's, it's not exactly this, it's close. I guess I didn't hyphenize getting last time. But what you can do with this is simply go to your filter, go to your blur tools, and my favorite one, Gaussian Blur, and just simply by adjusting the radius you can really fuzz that big time. And you can combine that with lowering the opacity of the layer if you wanted. But that's a nice way to create shadows, but it's an extra step and you need some extra, you got to remember what you did. And I can't really go back and edit that because it's not text anymore. As soon as I add a filter to it, it becomes a bitmap, not text. Anyway, so I'm just going to trash that layer, and I like the way that one works. Finally, I guess 2 quick steps. What I'd like you to do is, if you've got extra, like tons of extra space around what you've done, you shouldn't, but if you do, just go to your crop tool and kind of minimize how much extra material you have. Just be careful not to cut off any shadows, especially down at the bottom when the shadows come close to the edge. Watch your left and right. That's good. Right click to commit to that, crop, and now we've taken away some of the extra stuff. If you'll want to, you can use your selection tool to move the two words closer together. So I'm going to cut that, I'm going to paste it, and I'm just going to use my cursor keys to move it up some. So now they're nesting together a little more. I just noticed I lost my shadow when I did that, so that's not very good. I don't know if I can bring that back. No. So I'm going to go to my history tool and undo my little faux pas here. History. There. Get rid of my selection. So last thing I'd like you to do is throw your name on it, and not so big lettering this time. And so me, it's S. Burt, and way too big, so I'm going to go like, I don't know, 20 points, maybe 40. You got to highlight your words when you adjust them. That's good. So there's my name in the corner there, creates a separate layer for it. Okay, and now that I'm happy with everything, no shadows are cut off or anything like that, I'm going to go Layer in the pull-down menu and Flatten Image. You will save this under texture project on your Photoshop or image editing subfolder. And that's it.